this podcast is the two of us and a friend of ours now, Jacqui Jensen, who's based in Perth, but we've bumped into her in lots of different indie events, and we've all got to know each other a bit. And she's been on the podcast at least once before, but we knew that there were some things that she wanted to just explore a bit, so we asked her on. And this is the outcome of it, and I just really enjoyed just exploring different topics.
Whenever we meet Jacqui, we always get involved in really interesting discussions. So it was about time that we actually have her on the show to spend some time exploring those, because usually we're on the run or it's at the coffee break between something else. So it was lovely to have Jacqui on. It started off with sort of things that perhaps we were thinking were on our minds that were difficult. And what I really liked was by the time we got to the end, we'd not only worked through some of those things, we thought of some practical solutions that we could do as individuals, things that, we could campaign for, things we could ask our MSPs about. So I thought it was a really good discussion. I really enjoyed it. Felt much better at the end than I did at the beginning, which is always a good sign. So hope you do too.
Yes.
That Women for Independence got relaunched in the summer. So it's been largely backroom stuff that we've been doing. And I know Fatima done an article for The National about 6 weeks ago. And of course, everybody's been dead busy since then. Not just with life, like most women, but also busy with jobs and with with their political engagements and all that kind of thing. So what we're trying to do is we do have a national exec now. And we're trying to get the committee system set up, and we're trying to make sure that we've got regular meetings in place and that we're talking to each other about what's happening. So it's it's like anything that's basically had to start again from scratch.
Yeah.
Although in saying that, we had a good couple of hundred body of members that stuck with us all through the kind of a interregnum period. So it's now it's thinking about women and their lives. Women in all their diversity across Scotland and what they're going through, and I'm and we're all thinking about that. We're thinking about, how do we get women re-engaged again, not just in Women for Independence, but how do we get them engaged politically, whether that's a small P or a big P, not necessarily political parties, but thinking politically and acting politically. And I've just been thinking about how women are gaslit by everything. They're gaslit by Westminster policies. They're gaslit by how we are told that we need to live, and how we need to experience the economic problems the country's having. Why we should have energy bills that are higher than anywhere else in Europe. When you think about Perth and upwards and some of the border areas, that higher bills than the rest, than other European countries, never mind the UK. And the answer to that would be zonal pricing, but we're told we can't have it because it would make the south of England's bills too high.
That would be unfair. Can you say a bit about in what way women are gaslighted? I mean, presumably you're thinking of something that's specific to women and a bit. I mean, men are. There are probably groups of men that are gaslighted, but and what would be an example?
So if you think women are really struggling at the minute, aren't they? They're worried sick about when the kids' toes are going to come through their shoes and they're going to need to buy another pair of shoes because they're not actually budgeted for. They're budgeting within a financial constraint, where they actually don't have enough money for everything they need to budget for, whether that's their energy bills, whether that's food inflation, whether that's whether that's just day-to-day living. They don't have, they're struggling to get by, and everything's a juggle. And then you're told that we're all in it together and we need to carry this, and it's the general population of the UK that has to just manage this because you can't tax the wealthy.
And funnily enough, there's always money for nuclear weapons and things. That seems to be not something that we have to cut back
on. Any problems for? No. And when you think, I mean, that's a really good one. That we're gaslit when we're told that the defence, because Putin's a really nasty, that nuclear is crucial to our defence. We're spending £3 billion a year on nuclear, and the replacement submarines are going to be costing 41 billion. The royal family cost us 500 million a year, and they've had a £50 million rise this year. 50 million. And the Irish head of state costs 6 million a year. You know, we're told we're a wealthy country. The UK is the seventh, not the sixth anymore, but the seventh wealthiest country in the world. But 3 trillion is offshore, no circulating through our economy.
Yeah.
It's offshore, making some wealthy individuals a hell of a lot of money.
But the last time I looked on what we get charged, because it's like Westminster charging Scotland for our defence, which is actually their defence. It was something like 3 billion taken out of, put in the debit side of the GERS figures. And last time I looked for what Ireland spends on defence, it was getting on for 1 billion. But, not quite 1 billion. It's probably more than that. And I sort of went, well, there you go. I could cut our notional Scottish deficit by 2 billion just immediately, because we wouldn't, we'd have to, of course we have to defend ourselves. We'd have an army, we'd probably have a few ships.
Yeah.
But, it wouldn't be the 3 billion that we're stuck with because of what England wants to do.
Absolutely.
So,
we wouldn't have the cost of nuclear.
But I'm just sort of picking up on what you said about, because it's true, isn't it, that like the Labour Party, God, so-called, saying, well, yes, we're all in this together and we just have to kind of get through this. And for most people, I'm sure that's a worry.
Yeah, and just get on with it. But the other things that we're gaslit about is immigration. Everything we hear about is immigration is bad, and that Perth has been really unfortunate in that we've had 4 weeks of anti-asylum demonstrations that have been quite nasty, that have all been framed around protecting women and girls.
Oh, yes, that's right.
No framed around anti-asylum, even though they're right outside the hotel. They're framed around protecting women and girls, and there are women in those protests, and there are men dressed in paramilitary uniforms with masks on.
I can't remember, was it one of the bylines looked into? It was about 40% of the demonstrators that were bussed into a process had convictions for domestic abuse.
In Epping.
In Epping.
In Epping. 2/5 of the men who were demonstrating had domestic abuse convictions. Do you know that we've got 0.68% of our population that are refugees and asylum seekers? 0.68 of the Scottish population.
Yeah.
It's tiny.
I think it's a few thousand. It is absolutely ludicrous, and they're being demonised.
Yeah.
And all this started with a guy from Yorkshire who came up and filmed inside the hotel for 30 minutes, terrifying the guys, and then putting it on Facebook.
My goodness, I didn't know that.
Completely manipulated by far right politics in England.
Farage and Reform did something similar a few weeks back in Glasgow. So we've had demonstrations here. They're not big. Not when you look at the number of people that will go on an Indy march or a free, a Palestine march. They're not big, but they're noisy and they get publicity. And there's this horrible stuff appearing, which the council have been really good at quickly getting up there and getting rid of it. But it's been appearing, and then the same week that started, Nigel Farage did a speech where he just basically gaslit Glasgow. Glasgow, you're having all these immigrants pushed on you, and look, you haven't got anywhere to stay, and you're having to pay for it all. And I thought that is completely straight out of the Donald Trump playbook.
Yeah.
Don't bother about whether it's actually true or not, because what he said actually wasn't true. Just make people feel frightened and angry, and then encourage them to go out and spray graffiti all over the place.
It's absolutely heartbreaking. No, the demos in Perth haven't been huge. I mean, and for the most part, there's been more of us in the counter protests than there have been in the demonstrations. And we found out how to manage them, and the best way to manage them was to turn our back on them.
Oh, really?
Which they hated, drove them nuts.
Good one.
But it took us a few weeks to learn that.
Yeah.
And we're hoping they're finished now, but they might not be. But I see women being gaslit everywhere, and I also see them being tired and thinking politics isn't relevant to their lives. You know, that most women's lives when they're just in a slog, you know, trying to make ends meet, and actually not having the headspace to do anything else. And that's the women that we need their voices. We need to support them, not just the election, and it will be important for the election. But you know, the Constitutional Convention, the Civic Convention that the SNP are talking about?
Aye.
My God, do we need women's voices in that?
Yeah,
we need to
definitely.
be pointy-elbowed. We need to fight our way in there. We need to make sure that women are represented in that convention. And not just women who head up organisations. If Ross Foyer was in that convention, it would make my heart sing. But other women, you know, women who don't have a normal platform, their voices need to be heard as well.
I mean, do you have any sense yet about how that kind of citizens' convention might be set up?
Know about how it would work, but the SNP are quite clear that they're trying to set it up, but they're not going to run it. The only thing I know is that there has been some engagement with various civic organisations who, if it isn't purely about independence, if it is about Scotland's constitutional impasse and our right to decide, they'd be willing to join.
That's great.
That's good news.
Yeah.
That's really good news.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. But I mean, the reality is everything is political, isn't it? Every choice we make is political.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, when you knock folks' doors and they'll say, oh, I talk to my husband, I don't do politics, or they just say, no, we don't do politics in here. And I think you go to your GP, you use the health service, your kids have gone to school, you know, everything about your life is political. And if you say you're not political, you're giving up your opportunity to have a choice and all that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't want to hurt people and you don't want to push things down their throat. But the reality is, every choice, from Scotland's choice to remove the two-child cap and Starmer's choice to retain the two-child cap, you know, his choice in the winter fuel payments, his choice to then attack benefits for disabled people, they're now looking at mobility allowance.
I know.
You know, which is what we're just going to have disabled people sitting at home again then?
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrific. And these are political choices that affect people's day-to-day lives.
Yeah. You get an answer like that, maybe a chap in the door. Sometimes you're talking to someone, and okay, maybe it's true enough. They sort of don't kind of feel they're kind of all right, and, you know, they're not kind of feeling particularly hot under the collar about something. But their mum and their dad might be.
Yeah.
You know, the mum and they might be dependent on, you know, on help to run their car if one of them is disabled.
Absolutely. I was on a stall, an independent stall, some months back, and we were talking to people about pensions. And I was talking to an awful lot of people who were saying, "Doesn't affect me. My pension's fine. Don't want to talk to you." And I kind of went on another tack, and I was talking to a couple of people, and she said, the woman said to me, "Well, I've got my pension, but it doesn't have that. You know, I'm not interested in your leaflet because I still work." And I said to her, "How long have you had your pension?" And she told me how long she'd had her pension, which indicated that she was, you know, at the end of it, 69, 70. And I said to her, "So you're getting your pension, you've worked all your days and you're still working, and you're telling me that this issue around pensions isn't relevant to you?" And she kind of looked at me, and I said, "Is your man still working?" She says, "He works in B&Q." And I said, "Oh, come on." And she said, "You're right. But this is just folk who are trying to hold their head up." I mean, I could cry when I think about it. These are wee souls that have worked all their life, they've got shit pensions, they'll have that lower pension.
Yeah.
I mean, the higher one's bad enough, but the lower pension's terrible.
Which is still what most pensioners get.
Aye. They'll have that lower pension, they'll be living hand to mouth after working all their life, and the two of them are out working into their 70s.
Yeah.
And they're embarrassed.
Yeah.
They're embarrassed because they're skint. And it was, honestly, I could have wept.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is not fair. And now the triple lock's being threatened, because what you hear on podcasts, and I was listening to the news agents this morning talking about how hard it is for young people, the rent generation, and by God it is. And yet older folk have got the triple lock. And I'm thinking, don't pitch people against one another.
Yeah.
This is not about pitch. We're looking in the wrong places. We're not looking at the millionaires and the billionaires. We're looking at the wee pensioner up the road who's got the triple lock on the lowest pension in Europe.
The same thing with the refugees and your housing crisis. The fact that somebody is homeless and there's a homeless refugee, those situations are both wrong.
Absolutely.
It's not one causing the other.
Yeah. We're seeing this all the time, aren't we? We're seeing like groups being pitched against one another. Yeah. Because let's be honest, if you were a billionaire, who would you rather we were fighting? You'd rather that you had young people fighting the pensioners and working men fighting asylum seekers and women keeping their head down trying to get their families to manage and not having enough headspace to do anything. Meanwhile, their money's growing exponentially. So I would like to get some energy behind women. Yeah.
So is Women for Indy a vehicle to do that then? Because that was the huge power of it.
Yeah, it was
back in the day.
Exactly.
And women getting involved in conversations with other women who had never had that kind of conversation before, because it was open and welcoming. Now, I don't know what the network of wifey groups is like now. Certainly Selma's group's about the only one I can think of, the Edinburgh folk who have kept going. Certainly we had a very, very active group. We didn't survive COVID.
We've got a group of women in Perth that are aligned to Women for Indy. And we meet fortnightly. We meet in the afternoon in some sort of coffee place. And then the next fortnight we go for dinner. And we have a meal. And so we've got women in Perth, but we've also got women that come from Blairgowrie and Dunkeld.
I mean, is it representative of the kind of, the women that you've been talking about?
We've got women of a certain age. We've got one younger woman who's an academic. We've got people who have been stalwarts of the independence movement, since 2011, 2012, largely. And we don't have women who are out working with kids, struggling. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just that question, isn't it, about how can you reach out and make contact somewhere?
Yeah.
I mean, it is a whole kind of thing about how to make contact, isn't it? So having asked you that question, I'm kind of got it in my head now. And I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe one thing to do is, obviously get a leaflet of some sort, like the energy one, the Believe in Scotland energy one, which is a really, really good leaflet. It's excellent. And just stand outside
schools,
nursery groups, because folk with kids, they take their kids to a nursery group, just kind of go there and
food banks, I would imagine.
And food banks. On a Wednesday, I'm over in Govan on a Wednesday because my husband goes to a gym class in the MS Revive, and I just go for a wee walk around Govan and end up in having lunch somewhere. And I've just discovered the Govan Community Cafe, which is inside Pearce Institute. So it's on the ground floor. So on one bit is the cafe, and the other bit is the food bank. You can just walk from the one through to the other. But I did notice that there was leaflets lying out. Remember, other week, Fiona, I mentioned to you there was a march happening in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
There's not an indie march, although I think it will have indie groups. So there was leaflets for that were just lying on the tables on the community cafes.
Maybe we need to produce I think we're looking at Women for Indy leaflets.
I mean, that Womanifesto that, I mean, it's years ago that it started, and I don't know if you've actually got to the final draft yet, but there was so much in there that is absolutely laser focused on what is of relevance to women, rather than spending our time trying to promote the structure, here's a meeting, come to that, here's a means of doing so and so. Could we sort of skip past that and go straight to the meat of what the issue is and start on those kind of things and then pull people in that way? Because this thing that Marlene's mentioned, the Edinburgh March, I've no idea who is organising that, but they're very angry about a whole load of things that you should be angry at. My concern is that who are they taking that anger out on? Where are they directing that anger? And is that the right place?
I think it's a trade union thing.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. I mean, there's some good ideas. So we've been re-looking at the Womanifesto, where we're looking at putting together leaflets and whatever. I think taking them up to places like the Letham Hub in Perth, for instance, would be somewhere that we would take them up to, where there's a food bank.
I used to stay up at Letham.
Did you?
When I was a teenager, that's where Mum and Dad and I lived, up in Lethamsky.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So the hub's beautiful. It's a lovely big £3 million building, I think.
Wow, great.
But probably a Women for Indy meeting there. Like a public meeting where you speak might be a good idea. We'll have a wee think of that.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things we used to do back when we had a Women for Indy group here, or especially on a Friday morning, we'd go round a different community group every week and to their cafes, and we'd go with the people would be dripping with their saltire earrings and their badges, and we'd have armfuls of leaflets, but we'd just sit there, grab a table, coffee, bacon rolls often, and just have a laugh and a chat, and people would join in, and we were loud and we were visible. And we were sociable, but we weren't preaching at them. We were just there enjoying ourselves. So you could see that, there's a lot of positivity about people who supported independence, but also we were very, very welcoming to people who would join in the conversation. So I think that, that kind of thing you're talking about, don't just go and leave leaflets or don't just go and have a meeting. Is there something more that groups can be doing to actually just be a presence that's there? I
think we need to build our group base up again.
Yeah. I think if you have, it doesn't have to be an agenda as such, but if you've got certain key topics that you've got literature on and it's something that people are interested in, from Believe in Scotland, the power of having a day when everybody goes out and does something or everybody focuses on the same thing. And
that's the key to is getting independence, really.
Getting
people active.
But when you think about it, there is a sort of natural hierarchy, if you like, because you've got your activists at the top, the people who've got the time and the energy and the confidence to be really out there all the time. Then you've got a group roundabout who are interested in what they're doing and will turn up to the march on the day, won't necessarily organise it. Then you've got the group roundabout that who, just fancy a day out and thought they'd come along. And then you've got the group under that who weren't there, but they read about it or they watched something on YouTube. And then you've got the masses out there who know nothing about it. There's a lot of layers that can be tapped into in different ways according to what their situation is or their interest. But that group of activists, expanding that and then letting them expand outwards, it's probably the place to start.
Maybe if the polls start to move and if there's some activity coming up before the election, but generally, I mean, you know this yourself, that it's usually 4 weeks before the election, folk go, well, I'll come and help you now. And actually a lot of the legwork needs to be done now.
Yeah. Maybe getting into groups that aren't indie groups. I mean, we talked to Leslie about local democracy, and I mean, I got as far as writing to our local council because the community council elections, they had 14 places, 13 applications from men. And I sort of wrote the council going, how is this representative of our community? What responsibility does the council have to try and broaden why are women not stepping up for this? Do they even know about it? And I just got a letter back going, oh, well, community councils are nothing to do with us. They just do it themselves. I thought, well, clearly they don't do it themselves, or they do it in a way that only appeals to retired white men because they're the only ones who put themselves forward.
The point you raised there about the council saying it's nothing to do with us is actually the problem. It needs to be to do with the council, and it needs to have more value. And all you get is an admin budget. It's really no valued. It's not even like a parish council in England. A parish council has a town clerk. It's got a budget, and they've got powers. They've got planning powers for their local patch. So
I think it's a box to be ticked. Oh, we've consulted the council. And well, you consulted a group who is not representative of the locality. Well, these are big problems to solve, though, aren't they? How do we? What small thing can we do?
I think that would be an easy problem to solve. That just takes Holyrood to say we're going to change the community council makeup. We're going to give it power. And we're going to give it a bit of money, and then we will have elections.
Should we get a discussion going then with the communities minister, or who is responsible for that? Especially there's an election coming up. Maybe we should ask them all, what are you going to do to increase local? We could have a letter writing campaign to our prospective candidates. Because it's less than 200 days. The second time I've said this today, less than 200 days to the election. That's just disappearing
Yeah,
like sand
that's
through
life.
a
It's going.
timer. Yeah.
But yeah, something to do with local democracy. It wouldn't cost that much money, actually.
No, it would be
Yeah,
peanuts.
wouldn't cost. Yeah,
Just be peanuts, really. I mean, and peanuts to the Scottish government, but actually a really worthwhile thing to do. But I think that's excellent. Fiona, sounds like you've initiated a campaign there.
It does, doesn't it?
Just thinking some more about women, and I'm thinking women in politics, more kind of politics as in actually standing for an elected position. I mean, Fiona and we've both kind of noticed, I don't know, over years, really, that there's women who are in Holyrood at the moment who are not standing again. Now, I know at least one. It's it's health reasons, so it's kind of fair enough, and that's not the kind of thing I'm thinking. But folk who've got women MSPs who've got children, and you get the impression that part of the reason for not standing for election again is just the difficulties around having that job, having to be in Edinburgh at least part of the week, but maybe living up the Highlands or wherever
Kate
you live.
Forbes. You know that the nursery in Parliament's not a nursery; it's a creche.
Yeah, and she's got a constituency the size of Belgium as well.
Yeah.
Nurseries and creches are only open certain hours. I used to face this all the time. You're asked to go to a meeting in London, you've got to be back to pick your kid up by 6, and the meeting's not going to finish till 5. These things just do not match up. But in this day and age, especially in a parliament that was set up with a commitment to being family friendly, how they've managed to drift so much that it's not working for women.
And I mean, it seemed to work. I mean, the one thing that came out of COVID was that we got very good at doing being at home, but still being MSPs being at home. But they would be there kind of online, and I just kind of think surely that could have been built on to make it easier, so that someone. Well, yeah, I mean, fair enough. You're going to have to be in Edinburgh some of the time, but not as much of the time as maybe
3 days a week.
Thought. You thought you could make that work.
And that's another argument for devolving responsibility to the lowest possible level, because then it's more local, so then they're not having to spread their time so thin. And there are things that they're doing at Holyrood that they don't have to do. It could be done.
Seagulls,
bloody dangerous dogs.
Seagulls are a problem in every seaside place in Britain. And never do you see Westminster getting the doing that the Holyrood Parliament are getting around seagulls. The responsibility is with local authorities to get bins and recycling and everything else that's seagull proof.
Fireworks, there's another thing. Why is that not for local councils to manage? And recycling, why is it having to be dragged through Holyrood when locally they should have, they know what they've got to do and they've got the means to do it?
It baffles me when I watch what happens in Holyrood and think that wouldn't have been my experience at all when I lived in England. My experience would be that the local authorities would be responsible for that issue. But I do wonder that the Holyrood Parliament gets so little money that it can't afford to lose efficiencies of scale.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Small is always better, but small is always more expensive when it comes to organisations. But you've got to get a balance. You've got to put some money into it. And if we want it to work.
One of the guests that we had on some months back now was Esther Robertson, who was part of the civic body, the constitutional kind kind of committee. Convention, I think it was called, who was, so she was working away in the 90s and being part of that group. She was the secretary to it, but she's part of that group, kind of thinking through, what do we want? Okay, well, if we're heading towards having a Scottish Parliament, how do we want it to work? How about this and that? And I mean, I was quite surprised at just how much. I think I thought that how Holyrood ended up was basically dictated from, or came out of Westminster discussions. But actually, most of it came out of that group of people, and then they consulted more widely, of course, across Scotland. But one of the things she was saying was, well, yes, we did, and some of it has happened, but a lot of how they thought Holyrood would evolve has not happened. And one of the things in particular was devolving more powers to local authorities. That was part and parcel of how they were thinking about it, but it hasn't happened. And I mean, it's easy to say, as does get said, oh well, the MSPs want to kind of hold all the power together centrally, and they're not going to share it. There may be some people who that's true, but I suspect it's a lot more complex than that and nuanced than that, and there'll be difficulties that are hard to see unless you're actually there, kind of trying to make it happen. But
I think there's also something about how there's two things I would want to say. Firstly, back to Fiona's point about more subsidiarity and things being done at a local level. That would really suit me, because that's where women will get involved.
Yes.
More so than necessarily in Parliament. So that would be the first thing. But the complexity of it, I think some of that you just fall into, and some of that's because we've had people in parties in Holyrood that have tried to turn it into a pseudo Westminster conflictual Parliament, rather than that rounded consensual model. You want to play it out like Westminster plays out. So when you get things being shouted at you, seagulls, for instance, that ended up as a real problem, didn't it? And now that then has to be tackled by the Parliament, because nobody's sitting around saying, our coastal communities are having a bit of a challenge with seagulls. How can we collectively be responsible for helping these local communities to resolve their problem? And that thinking time is not there.
That's right.
And it's the recognition as well. If you're being attacked for something, you're going to make sure that you're right across it next time, so it's not going to happen again. That diverts attention away from something you're not being attacked on.
And I mean, I think that's a really good point to make about the thinking time, because there's, things are complex, and there is needed to be, good in-depth thinking and thinking time from a Parliament that's only got 129 people, even if it happens to be a matter that they agreed on, which they mostly kind of don't. But so that's a really important one. And I mean, one of the examples that Esther brought up was well, why is Holyrood deciding about something to do with having a tourist tax? Why that just should be done in Edinburgh, or Glasgow, or wherever. That should be done at a local level. Why on earth is that being done at Holyrood? It just means that other things, higher level stuff, that
doesn't get done.
They could be doesn't get done because they haven't got the capacity.
The capacity issue is really interesting, because if you think of what we're told, when we become independent, we will need another 33,000 civil servants, to deliver everything the state needs to deliver across Scotland. We need another 33,000. There is a rather limited pool of research, policy, legal, IT, finance, admin, all working in Holyrood and supporting our legislation and supporting our MSPs, or any MSPs across the Parliament. It is a limited resource, and that resource will dictate how much work can get done on any legislative timetable. So you're absolutely right when you say that when they get caught up in things they're kind of miscellaneous things. It takes up really, really valuable policy and legislative support that could be working on things that are much more significant.
We used to have a prioritisation matrix there, Robin. One axis is urgent, one axis is important, and that's the classic. It's urgent, but it's not important. Some of it isn't
urgent, but not important. And actually, to take that matrix, because what happens when people are getting caught up in urgent but not important is that people get well, you started off this conversation, Jacqui, we're talking about how people get tired, but people in that sort of working situation get tired as well. People get burnt out. That's, because they never can step back to just think more clearly about what it is that's needed. So I think we've hit on something there.
We can resolve that. But three of us will go in, work with the chief exec and tidy that place up.
There's something else Esther said as well, she said, why do they spend so much time on legislation, which is hugely demanding of time and committees and legal and drafting? She said you can do an awful lot through policy. Mm-hmm. And it was never expected they'd do everything by way of legislation. And you wonder if it's kind of been a defense mechanism to, shore up what they're saying. So, well, actually, we've got a law about it. But refocusing that energy and that time could be quite productive. But I
think the problem with policy is that it's so easy for the next guy to come along and change it.
Well, it is, but if it's a good policy, if it's a useful policy, why would they? That's
the thing that you would have thought the policy, that the whole of that consensual model of a parliament.
Yes, exactly.
But that's not where we are, is it?
Maybe that's where it went wrong. Well, not exactly wrong, but imbalanced. It's not wrong. But you've mentioned it already that, somehow we got into somehow mirroring Westminster. It's the parties down there that make the decisions and come up with the policies. And it's also very adversarial. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of come into it as well. I mean, like First Minister's questions, as far as Esther was concerned, back then, back in the 90s, that they weren't thinking there'd be First Minister's questions. And that's a complete kind of just copying of what happens in Westminster. So, maybe, if we actually did have a parliament that said we want more consensually, then we could get somewhere with that. And you wouldn't always, maybe that's true, like someone says, well, someone else gets voted in next time, that policy can just get reversed. So you want to stop that. That's understandable. But it wouldn't happen if there was a more of an agreed way of working together.
And it doesn't happen in Scandinavian parliaments. The whole policy intent for years and years and years and years. Because they've always got coalitions. Always, it's the norm.
Yeah. And that can also be in your manifesto that it will be your policy to do X. Therefore, if you carry it, you'll carry it on if that's what people vote for, because that's what they want. But it could be in a strange sort of way that having Corbyn and reform might result in us having a much more colourful parliament that means coalition and collaboration is going to have to.
It's going to have to happen.
Brought in.
So it certainly will in the UK Parliament. When you look at the, everything's at 7. Everybody's around 17% in the polls at the minute. Yes. And Westminster, how are they going to manage that?
The trouble with that though is that that can still produce maybe reform with a huge majority in the way that Labour's got a huge majority on a very small slice of a third of the vote. But if it happened up here, we would have to work with that, and that's one of the benefits of a proportional system. Yeah.
So,
well, I don't know if we've quite set everything to rights, but we've had a jolly good go at it, haven't we?
We've come up with some things. The trick is I need to do something to make them happen. So I don't know we'll have to think what the next step is.
I could get hold of some leaflets from Gordon about the eye switch and just leave them strewn around the Govan community cafe. Well, I need to ask if I could do it, but I'm I could at least ask, couldn't I?
You could at least ask.
Time flew past talking to Jacqui. I really enjoyed it. It was great having her on. It's just great having another person's input, sparks off your own thinking. And
if you're out there thinking, I would like more women's voices on YouTube, get in touch. We're at IndyPodcasters@gmail.com. Drop us an email, and who knows, we might end up doing more of these. Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to make sure you're following us and subscribe to us, then you get notified every time we put something new out so you don't miss anything. That would be great. Also, you can click the little bell if you're watching on YouTube.
And sign up for our mailing list. You can do that from the website, and we always send one out at the beginning of each month to tell you what's happening. Last but not least, you can buy us a coffee on coffee.com.